Hello everyone. Today I'm going to explain how to set up OpenVPN for corporate networks under 15 minutes. The reason why you might want to set up an OpenVPN server is so that you can provide remote access to your users from outside the network. And it's a good alternative for something like Sonicwall NetExtender. This video's target audience is Windows sysadmins, so I'm going to assume that you have the following skills. One, the ability to create Hyper-V virtual machines. Two, that you know how to forward ports on your firewall. And number three, it's not a skill per se, but an open mind to Linux. Especially if you're a Windows sysadmin, you may have shied away from Linux in the past, and I understand. I'm going to walk you through step by step on how to set this up, so don't be intimidated. It'll be very straightforward. Your first step is going to download the Hyper-V appliance from openvpn.net. Here is a full URL, or I've shortened the URL for you if you're following along. Here is the website. Now about halfway down the page, you're going to see a zip file you can download. So this is going to be a zip file of a Hyper-V VHD, which you're going to attach to your Hyper-V virtual machine. Now, just as a disclaimer, this entire video, I'm just going to be running through the instructions written here. But if you're like me, I like to see a quick video tutorial before I do a deep dive into a new subject. So once you're done watching the video, I recommend that you come to this page and follow along on the detailed notes here as well. OpenVPN. I'm going to give it a new home folder. This is just a test machine, so it's going to be right on the C drive. You have to pick generation 1 when you're doing Linux machines. And by default, it gives 1 gig of RAM, which is fine. I'm going to uncheck the dynamic memory option because I prefer it to be static. And give it a V-switch. And I'm going to attach the hard disk later because I'm going to download it from OpenVPN. Alright, so now that I have a virtual machine created, I already downloaded and unzipped the VHD. So I'm going to move that over to the folder that was created earlier. And go to the settings. And under IDE controller 0, add the hard disk that we just copied. Okay, hit OK. Now we're ready to start it up. Okay, now we're at the login screen. In Linux, the administrative username is root, and the password is going to be OpenVPN-AS. Before you can continue, you have to accept the legalese. And from here on out, all I'm going to do is keep pressing enter to accept the defaults. Now, they've done a pretty good job of putting in the most common settings, so all you have to do is just accept the defaults and you'll have a running server in no time. Now, the only thing that's maybe of note is going to be the license key. You're going to press enter here as well to skip it. And what that means is you're going to have a free license with 2 concurrent connections. So if you have maybe 3 or 4 users that occasionally connect, that's probably going to be enough. But if you do need more than 2 concurrent connections, the minimum purchase through OpenVPN is going to be 10 users or 10 concurrent connections, and that's going to be $150 per year. So what that really works out to is maybe like $12 per month for 10 users, which is really nothing. So I think it's a killer deal. Okay, so now we're at the command prompt. That's when you have the pound sign or hash sign, depending on how old you are. And the cursor is blinking. So that means it's ready to receive commands. First thing we're going to do here is going to set the root password. So again, the default password was OpenVPN-AS. we're going to want to change that. And to do that, we're going to do passwd. So let's give it a password. And the second thing we want to do is set the password for user account called OpenVPN. Now in Linux, they really want you to use a separate user account for different things. It's not like in Windows where you kind of get lazy and use administrator for everything you do. They really want you to create a separate user account for different things. So OpenVPN is already created for you, but it just doesn't have a password yet. So we need to set that. And to do that, we say passwd OpenVPN. And let's give it a password. And that's it. Our next step is going to set a static IP on the virtual machine, because by default it's in DHCP. Now I'm going to warn you ahead of time, it's going to get Linuxy. You'll see what I mean. But bear with me, after this it'll get a lot easier. So I'm going to go to the instruction page on how to set this up. And it's a link, how to set static IP on Ubuntu 18. So the command that you want to use is right here, nano. So let's bring up our virtual machine. Nano, which is a text editor in Linux. 01 net cfg YAML. So that's the config file. So you'll notice that GCP here is yes. We're going to say no. And for the rest of it, we want to follow this format right here. And notice that I'm using space to indent because tab is not allowed. Don't ask me why. It's just Linux. Go with it. Now I'm using the IP address that works for my network, but of course use appropriate address for yours. And notice that there's 2 spaces here for the indentation. Okay, when you're done inputting all the correct info, Control X to exit. And it's going to say save modified buffer, which is a unnecessarily nerdy way of saying would you like to save your changes, so you say yes. And the file to write, that's the config file, you press enter. And to apply the changes, you do netplan apply. Netplan apply. Okay, to confirm whether you did this correctly, try pinging it. Alright, it's replying, so we did this correctly. Alright, now that you've successfully mastered Linux, your reward is a nice GUI. So let's get to that IP address from earlier. And it comes with a self-signed certificate. You know this, you can just safely ignore. And it's gonna have a login screen. Now we're not gonna use this. That's for the users. Since you're an admin, we're gonna go to the admin portal. So earlier we set the password for OpenVPN. And of course say agree. Here we are. So now we're logged into our OpenVPN server. We're almost there. What we want to do here is to set the FQDN. So what I mean by that is configuration, network settings. You'll notice that there's an IP address here. Now, this is the address that your clients are going to use to reach the OpenVPN server. So this should be an externally facing address. So for example, now it is recommended to use FQDN as in a record in DNS, That way, if you ever change your IP address because you upgraded your ISP, for example, you don't have to update all your clients to point to the correct destination anymore. But you do see that it is an option to do the IP address, but of course, FQDN is nicer. Hit Save Changes. And one thing you'll note is that saving the change is not enough. You have to apply the change. And now, the last step is going to be to forward the firewall ports. Now, since you're a sysadmin, I'm sure you know how to do that on your own firewall. And only two ports that you need to forward is TCP 443, the old familiar HTTPS, and UDP 1193. So at this point, your server is ready to use. You can start creating new users now under user permissions. I'll just make one called rely on for demonstration purposes. And what to give it a password. Save and apply. Okay, now as a user, you can go to the user portal here. Now I'm pointing to the internal IP address, but of course you'll be using the FQDN that you set up earlier. And if you forwarded the correct ports, you should be able to get to this user portal. So let's log in as rely on. And basically what you'll get is a list of Connect apps you can download based on your operating system. So you probably want to download Windows if you're on Windows, obviously. And I have it pre-downloaded here. And since I'm inside the network, I won't be able to connect, but just to give you an idea, the OpenVPN agent will pop up and ask for your password. And you hit connect and say yes to trust the certificate. And it's going to time up for me because I'm inside the network, but that's about it. Hope you guys enjoy. And on my next video, I'm going to talk a little bit about securing the OpenVPN server. Specifically, I want to talk about how to do Active Directory integration and also talk about where did that go? Configuration, client settings, how to set up Google Authenticator. So, see you in the next video.